Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I'm Mark State. And as always, a whopping great thank you to all you wonderful people out there who keep this podcast on the go. If you want to support the podcast, there's hundreds of hours of extra material. Go to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and, keep us going. Keep the thing going. Mr. D, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm just gearing up for the big opening 2024 of the Academy, Bestseller Academy. We've got some amazing people in the Academy already and some amazing new coaches coming in, as we announced last week as well. So if you're interested in joining us for a writing journey of a lifetime, you want to get that book started, finished, published, rewritten, dusted off, and wherever you're at in the process, however advanced you feel you are, or however much of a beginner you might be, we welcome all levels. So do pop along to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com and find out more about it and get your application. There's an early birds, which is the middle of December, 14th of December. So get your early bird application in to guarantee yourself a spot. Mr. Stay, how has everything been for you? It's been a run up to Christmas. Is it always busy in your house this time of year?
Bonkers, absolutely bonkers. It's I can't wrap things. Now, when I was a bookseller, the only time I ever lost my rag with the customer was when some smart arse at Waterstone's head office decided it would be a good idea, because we offered a wrapping service. So if you bought a book, we go into the back room and we'd wrap it up and put a little gold bow. But they decided one Christmas, no, we're going to put this on the shop floor so people can see it being done. And no
pressure.
I can't wrap for toffee. I'm hopeless at it. I just can't do it. And so I'm doing this and folding bits over and everything. And this fella, and it's, just a few days before that run up to Christmas is always so stressful. It's just constant barrage, people coming for last minute presents and what have you. I'm always super extra nice to anyone who works in retail or restaurants and any kind of service industry in the run up to Christmas, because the stress levels are so high. And this guy was like, "Oh God, do you want me to do it?" And I just went, "Do you want to do it then?" So I just completely, I was like, "Oh no, this just turned me into a monster." So I was taken off wrapping duty after that. Don't do that.
That's absolutely brilliant. And this isn't. I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there who know how to rap and are great at rapping. I'm not the best rapper. I have been practicing a bit over the years, but I was just thinking of like all the people queuing up. There's several people rapping, and it's like, oh, I've got the bloke. Oh no, because if they're asking you to rap it, it's for a reason, right? It's because, especially if they're last minute, they're probably bringing it straight to their loved one. And how present is rap says a lot about the love and care that's gone into it as well, right? I mean,
does it though?
I don't know. Do you know what I do love? I love the parallel universe to that, which is young kids' presents that they've wrapped themselves for parents. Those are the best.
It's more sticky tape than paper.
Yeah, where it's ripped and it's it's folded multiple times, a bit of the book's poking through, the usual. But it's the thought.
This is why you should buy books for Christmas, because they are the easiest thing to wrap. They're basically little rectangles. So
I bought my you won't be listening, but I bought my little nephew these floating ball things. Have you seen them? Like they're the big Christmas. No. They're like levitating balls. They like float up in the air. I don't know how they do it.
Living in the future.
I'm living in the future, Mark. When you come to Canada, you suddenly go 20 hours into the future at least.
Floating balls.
But it's really weird. But the packaging, nightmare. It was like they had two of them. One sticking out on one side and one sticking out on the other side, one at the top, one at the... So you imagine trying to wrap that. I mean, it's just... It's like impossible. So people have to think about this when they put out Christmas presents.
It's my great nephew's birthday, and I got my Peppa Pig bunch of toys. Lost Peppa is one. I got my whole bunch. So
he won't be listening to the podcast. Then. No spoilers.
He's more into politics podcasts actually. That's more
politics
and the cricket. Absolute pigging nightmare to wrap, because it's all, pigging. Hey,
I was going to say, was that?
That was not intentional. That was not intentional.
Love it.
But so it's, and I've sent it in the post, so it's probably going to arrive as a completely broken box with the pigs poking out and ruining the surprise. So sorry.
I will say, I will say there is one disadvantage to giving books as a present. Not that I'm saying anyone shouldn't give books. I think everyone should just give books. Well, that's all you should do. Just buy books. Mark Stay's got a few out. Hey, back to reality, folks.
Hey, perfect.
Know someone that loves a bit of a music, like, back in time.
Gift. Perfect gift.
What a perfect if you're struggling for last minute ideas. But the problem with giving books as a gift, it's a bit like when we used to give CDs. You remember that time era back in the past, the CDs? You kind of know what they are, right? You don't know what it is. What type of, but you know you've got a
vinyl, you'd ask for now, that's what I call music for, and you see the and it's exactly. I know what that is.
It's either a really stiff calendar and because also the other thing is, we all do it. I don't know if you still do it, but if there's presents under the tree early, our kids they're under there like a cat with catnip. They're like there and they're picking them up, looking for names.
Yeah.
And then they're flexing them, probably breaking half of them in the process.
My dad is the worst. My dad is the worst.
Dads are always the worst. Is it our generation of dads?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so.
My father-in-law, and big shout out to John, and he won't mind me saying this, but my father-in-law, any present that he gets, like a week, 2 weeks, a month before, he can't wait. He's opened it. I'm like ringing up saying, has it arrived? Is it on the, oh, thanks so much for the socks or whatever. And I'm like, what? You've got to wait. You can't open it beforehand. It's meant to be for the day.
He's already taking it for a refund and store credit.
Exactly. It's on eBay. It's been re-gifted. Actually, that's probably the reason you do it, right?
That's it. Yeah.
That's clever. I wonder if anyone's ever in the history of the world, I'm sure this must have happened, just all the presents they've given are just re-gifted. The things they got and they just gave them to different friends.
Good idea.
Cheap Christmas, really, when you think about it.
That's a good idea for a Christmas novel, actually.
Yeah, when a re-gifting going wrong. There you go.
Yeah. Re-gifted.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good think on that one.
Cogs are whirring, yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Oh dear, what have I started? Brilliant stuff. Well, that's probably enough of our wrapping today.
Sorry.
And I think it's... Well, it's good. It's like getting into the season, right? This time of year always goes too fast for me. Get to Christmas, and then Christmas happens, and you've been so busy in the run up to it, you haven't really had a chance to enjoy it, look forward to it, take a breath. And then by the time you get past Christmas, I know there's meant to be 12 days of Christmas, but really after I get past Christmas Day, it kind of feels like it's the big event's happened. It's like the main prize has happened, and it's like, well. So yeah, this is the time to enjoy it, folks. So if you can get a breather amongst the craziness of it, go into a bookshop and buy your friend a book. And also, just to remind people, sorry, we mentioned this last week. If you're in a bookshop and you can find the book that most influenced you as a child, buy a copy, wrap it up, and give it to some child of a similar age. Any child, a friend of a family, a niece, a nephew. Whoever it might be, go to find a local charity that supports kids.
My copy of The Joy of Sex did not go down well.
Can't believe you said that. And you usually say
the tone.
I think that's the first. That's the first time I've ever had to say that to you on the podcast. So you always say that to me, and those are the bits we've always had to cut out. Which would be funny if we could
I'm leaving, can't you?
I know he's announced he's off, and now he's going to be effing and blinding, telling us all his rude stories from the part. No, it could be quite fun actually, folks. I think we should bring it on. Joy Sex. Yeah, Kama Sutra as well. Probably not the best gift.
I used to go into, you go into other friends' houses and what have you. Are
you about to talk about other friends' parents' bookshelves?
Yes. And, a friend of mine, who shall remain nameless, but there, right on the shelf, hardcover copy of The Joy of Sex.
Wow.
Which was quite
back in the day,
book.
Pre-internet, right?
Yeah. Bearded hippie and his girlfriend.
Everyone knows what Mark's talking about if they've ever seen that book.
A certain age. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't believe. So of course, when they walk out there and just browse the bookshelves, it is.
That book was an education. I will say. I will say that it was an education. I can't even remember who had a copy of it.
It's taken us over 450 episodes to get to this.
Yeah. Well, as they say, we're getting to the climax, aren't we? So.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Couldn't resist it.
End of the year.
This is like retro bestseller experiment, isn't it? Do you remember when we had to kind of pull it back a bit? Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Folks, listen. Yeah. Welcome if you're new to this show.
It's not always like this.
It's not always like this. Just once in a blue moon when Mark and I drop our guards. Love it. this is what it's about then, Mark. This is why we do it. Everyone, I mean, maybe Drive Sex was just a thing in the UK. Was it an international bestseller? Maybe there's a ton of people in North America and Australia like rushing out to their bookstores.
No, I think it was an international phenomenon. Yes.
Where are they now? That's what I want to know. They probably got a family with like 20 kids.
Yeah. They were always at it, weren't they?
It's like that scene from Monty Python. You know the one I mean? Yeah. Woman ironing. Right. Oh, another one.
Get that, would you, Deirdre?
Yes. Oh my gosh. We still got an interview to get through, Mark.
Yes.
Come on, let's do this. Come on,
author on the show.
Okay, professional broadcasters. We're not. Mark, segue.
Award-winning podcast. Yes.
Award-winning podcast. In fact, yeah, absolutely. Tell us about an incredible guest today.
Well, Luke Chilton, who writes as L.M. Chilton. He was a journalist for many, many years. He's worked on TV for shows like This Morning, The One Show, Loose Women. He's written for mags like Cosmo and Glamour. He's written for The Mirror. And he's written a fantastic book called Don't Swipe Right, which is his debut novel, which is a murder mystery set in the world of kind of online app dating. And it's very, very funny. And we discuss changing titles and openings, how to get your book on TV, everyone wants to know that, and why you shouldn't set a sex scene in a police station.
You see, here we go again. It's just like, this was obviously the build-up.
Yes.
And we should also say that for anyone listening as well, thinking how the bestseller experiment can affect your life, Luke is an avid fan and listener, and so we take full responsibility for everything you're about to hear. So let's dive in, folks, and listen to Mark chatting with the wonderful Luke Chilton.
Luke Chilton, welcome to the bestseller experiment. How are you today, sir?
I'm very good. It's wet and windy here, but I'm enjoying it.
Excellent stuff. It's wet. And listeners, we're doing this on the big storm day. If you're in the southeast of England, you'll know what that is. We like to make a drama out of a crisis, don't we? But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about your spectacular new book, Don't Swipe Right, which, and we'll talk about how the title changed as well in a minute, which is just a terrific read. Luke, tell us about your debut, Don't Swipe Right.
Well, I call it a millennial murder mystery. It's set in the terrifying and mystifying world of dating apps. And it's a whodunit. And it follows the hero called Gwen Turner. She's just been dumped and she's hitting the dating apps really hard. And the twist is each of the men she dates turns up dead. And she has to solve who's doing this, why they're doing this. And of course, she becomes the chief suspect. So it's a sort of comedic but thrilling mishmash of a rom-com and a murder mystery.
Excellent stuff. And this was inspired, I believe, by the fact that you went on something like, now I was looking at an article in The Mirror where it said you went on 212 dates.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably more than that. I thought that sounded quite good for the article because when I met my partner, my girlfriend now, she was number 213. Lucky number 213. So I thought that sounded good for the newspaper. But I think in reality, it was probably like 500, 600 dates. I was dating for probably about a decade on every different app going and became a bit addicted to it. So that was a lot of the inspiration is how these algorithms of these dating apps work. And they keep you on them and they don't want you to find love. They want you to keep dating and they're serving you particular types of person based on your likes and dislikes and who you're swiping yes or no to. And yeah, it's quite a disposable industry of making people disposable and going on to the next person. And I really thought how that was quite similar to a murder mystery because you'd go on a date with somebody, you'd learn everything about them, their dog's name, their mum and dad, how their relationship with their boss at work, and then you'd end up never seeing them again if it was just one date.
Yeah.
And I thought that was quite interesting, how you'd learn so much about a person and then you'd never see them again. And so that's why I worked into the book. And in the book, Gwen goes on these dates with these terrible men, and then they're murdered. And she has dismissed them as kind of toxic, awful men. But in the book, she has to go back and think, oh, well, what did he actually say on that date? And look for clues. So it was all about going back and thinking, oh, well, actually, are these people disposable or should I have paid a bit more attention at the time? So I tried to weave that into the story. But at the same time, it also gave me a good opportunity to put in all the kind of terrible date stories that I'd been on and I'd heard from all my friends. And when you go on dates, they always tell you, this is my worst date, and all the terrible people, and I've had to climb out the bathroom window and all that stuff.
I mean,
it was funny as well.
This is the great thing about the book, is the reaction to it. I mean, you just have to look at the reviews on Goodreads and Amazon, and you'll see a lot of people can relate to, apart from the murder side of things, a lot of people can relate to this.
Well,
and that
some
relatability.
people want to murder their bad dates, I think. But yeah, I think that's the key. Everyone has been on a bad date, probably. And, you know, certainly now dating apps are the main way people meet someone. So lots of people have been on these terrible dating apps. They've been on terrible dates. And everyone likes to live vicariously through their single friends. So even if you're not single, I think you kind of want to hear about all these bad dates. And certainly when I was dating, that's the first thing everyone wants to know is like, what was the worst date? They don't want to hear about the good fun stories. They want to hear like the terrible people who were. So yeah, I think that's a big part of the appeal of the book is you hear about 5 of Gwen's terrible dates. So you hear about the murder mystery and that she's running around town and trying to solve the mystery. And then every so often you get a little vignette of her bad date.
It's great. Now, it's a great high concept. There's a great instant hook there. Had you been writing much before this? Had you been sort of looking for that great hook, or are there unfinished novels in your drawers somewhere? And how long had you been writing for?
Well, do you know what? So I'm a journalist by trade, as I think a lot of authors are previously journalists. But so I'd written a lot in my day job, but that was non-fiction. But I loved reading murder mysteries, and I loved reading novels. So, and I think every journalist secretly is desperate to be a novelist. But no, I tried to write one when I was about 20 that was awful. And I did actually get to the point of sending out chapters to publishers, but it was like in those days, it was putting them in envelopes and sending them out in the post. And I think I got one reply, one rejection. And then I put it to bed for decades and didn't think again until lockdown, really. And I think, the pandemic, and where a lot of people were like, oh, what am I going to do now? I need a hobby. And that's when I really started writing. And this idea, through dating and through being single, had been circulating in my head for a while. And that's when I started putting it down on paper. But I think I used to work for one of these terrible supermarket magazines called Real People magazine. And that was my first job in journalism. And I used to interview people who'd had the most traumatic and amazing stories. They'd had amazing weight loss, or they'd married their sister's cousin's gerbil, and you'd interview them and then you'd rewrite their story in first person for the magazine. So you'd have to give it a beginning and middle and end. You'd have to take this kind of wild story that didn't have a beginning, a middle and end, and format it for a magazine where people could read it and enjoy it, but it was still true for the most part, and it was in first person. So you also had to become that person and edit their story. So I think that was really good training for being an author, because this book's in first person, this book's a female protagonist, and I think that stood me in good stead.
Definitely. And this is a lockdown book, and we've had a few authors coming on the show recently that wrote lockdown books, and some authors have told us they found it very difficult to write during lockdown. Others were just relieved that they had the time to do something and to escape into the book. What was that process like for you? Was it a way to escape from everything that was going on in the world, or were you working anyway?
I was working, but like a lot of people, like the world went crazy, and suddenly, and actually, the time I worked in advertising, so the advertising market was in like they didn't know what people wanted to buy or sell or look at. So there was a lot of time of me sitting in my garden, and it was that first couple of ones which were in the summer. And I was quite lucky. I had a garden. I was in the sunshine. I didn't have a lot of work to do because the market was confused. So I was sat in my garden with not a lot to do, single, and needed a hobby. And I think in hindsight it was a bit of escapism, but at the time it seemed like a good way to focus my mind on something that I should have been doing for years and never quite got around to. So I was lucky in that respect.
Yeah. It's been interesting listening to a lot of lockdown authors. It's like the feeling was, I've got to do this now, or I might never get around to doing it at all. Was that the case for you?
If not then when? So and I'm glad I did it. And obviously it continued after that, and it's not quick writing a book, and it took a lot of revisions and a lot of redrafting, but it got there.
And was this your first novel? Was this your first full-length novel?
This is the first full-length novel that I have actually finished and done. And I think what people say is right. You get to that sort of 30,000 word mark, you tip over that, and then you're going to finish and you're on the down slope. But yeah, it's the first one I've ever finished, and it's done all right.
It has. Listen carefully, Luke. You'll hear the grinding of teeth from so many of our listeners. There we go. Yeah. Well, it was. I mean, you say it took time, but actually, it was pretty quick because now, dear listeners, Luke is a listener to the podcast, and he got in touch with me because I offer sort of feedback services, editorial services, and you sent me an early version of this in 2021, and I was just digging out my notes from this to look at it. Back then, the title was X, a big EX, which I think changed to Swiped and then Don't Swipe Right. Right. So talk about the shape that it was in 2021 and having finished the book, what were your first instincts? So
I'd written this maybe first, second, third draft, perhaps at that point, but it was still kind of rough. It was still too quick, not enough depth to it, but I was excited, and I was looking for sort of validation, looking for feedback, and looking for somebody to sort of say, you're on the right track, or keep going. And I think a lot of writers feel that, because I don't think at that point I'd given it to many other people like friends and peers to read. I later on did do that. But I think it's just you at home at your computer, and you've got this 60,000 word document, let's say, and you don't know if it's any good, or you think it's quite good, and you can't see the wood for the trees. So it's really useful to have someone like yourself, a professional, an author, published author, who's spoken to loads of other authors, to have a look at it and just say, stand back, look at it objectively and say, oh, you could improve this, you could do this. And it was really helpful to do that. And it was really great feedback from yourself. And it just also, I think the biggest thing is like, keep going. It tells you, okay, this isn't a load of crap. You can do it. You can. It needs work, but keep going.
I'm looking at mine. They're quite harsh, actually.
No, it's good. And you don't want people to be, because that's sometimes if you're friends. And later on, I had friends read it, and they were really helpful. But you always think, oh, are you just being my friend? Are you just being nice? Are you going to tell me the hard truths I need to hear? Like I think you said very wisely, change the title. So yeah, the title was EX for a long time. But they weren't her exes, they were her dates. And so it didn't really work. And you can't really imagine that looking very good on a book. Yeah, X.
I think one of my problems with the title as well was just search engine optimization. It's difficult to find with just two letters. And in a way, it almost sounds like a science fiction novel as well, weirdly.
It didn't work. And then, so Swiped, and it's going to be Swiped in the US, actually, if any US
right.
comes out in May 2024 as Swiped in America. And then the UK publishers chose the title Don't Swipe Right for the UK.
Excellent. And you wisely ignored some of my advice, because Luke very kindly sent me a signed copy, and it says in here, I hope you enjoy Don't Swipe Right. Sorry, the sex scene in the police station stayed in, which...
Yeah, you said take that out. You and again, you were right. You said people on Goodreads are not going to like that, and there has been a few people on Goodreads who say it's ridiculous that the lead character ends up sleeping with the policeman in the police station. But I liked it.
Good for you. No, it's fair enough.
It's more exciting than just being in a bedroom flat. So I kept on the sofa in the police station. But readers can decide. And please let me know if you enjoyed that or didn't.
No, it's good. No, good for you. You have to stand your ground sometimes. What I found really fascinating is just comparing the opening few chapters of what you sent me and the opening few chapters of the book. And this is a conversation we've been having with people on the Bestseller Academy recently who are going through their first round of edits. They're finding that they're changing the openings quite dramatically. So you talk about the process. I think you got yourself an agent, and then you got picked up by Head of Zeus, no less, who are fantastic. Talk about the process of the edit for you, and with proper editors, and how that went for you, and what changes you went through with them.
Well, it was interesting. I'll tell you this story, which is a big no-no, and everyone says don't do this. don't send it off to agents before it's fully finished. But again, like I was saying to you earlier, I was kind of excited about it, and I'd reached a point where I couldn't really go any further, or I needed some feedback, I needed some validation, and I just thought, I got to get this out into the world. I need some external somebody to say this is worthwhile. So I did the stupid thing, which I hadn't finished the book, and I polished up the first 3 chapters, and I just chose maybe one agent I really liked. I thought this agent is perfect for me. I did all the research like you meant to do, and every way you read says they won't reply for 8 weeks, if that. So I thought, well, I'll send it out now, and I've got 8 weeks to finish it, or give me a good deadline, focus me. Of course, I sent it off to one of the top agents in the country. They emailed back the very next day saying, "We love this. Send us the full manuscript, please." And I didn't have the full manuscript. And I was going on a weekend away with my friends to Barcelona that weekend. So I said, "Oh, I'll send it to you on Monday." And I spent the whole holiday in the airport writing. I was on the plane to Barcelona writing and trying to finish it. And I did sort of finish it, but of course it wasn't good enough to be sent. So the agent in question sent me loads of feedback, said, "Look, it's not quite there. Do this. Tried this," and was very kindly sent feedback that said, "It's not for us, but you can resubmit it if you do all these changes."
Right.
So I wouldn't advise anyone to do that. It did kind of help me in the end, because I did get that feedback. I did get somebody saying, "This is good. We like this, but it's not ready." And I went back, and along with your suggestions and her suggestions, I changed. Not, I wouldn't say like substantially rewrote it, but I was able to tweak it. And also, I had a few of my friends read it, these beta readers read it, and they talked about the intro as well and the first few chapters. And of course, obviously, those are the first things that anyone reads: your reader, your publishers, your agents. So they've got to be really honed. And I went back and I did change the first few chapters, and it took me, I'd say, about 2 months maybe of rewriting. I had a day job, so it wasn't 9 to 5, but I rewrote those first few chapters, and I really honed them, and I really polished them, and I was really pleased with them in the end. So I do think it is really worth. I wouldn't advise sending off to agents, but it's really worth getting as many people to read it, especially those first few chapters, as possible, and taking in that information and seeing what they like and what they don't like. And it worked a lot better. And whereas that agent ultimately did pass on it in the end, I think their feedback was so helpful, and ultimately helped me get my brilliant agent now at Watson Little, who's done a terrific job of
also
selling it all around the world.
For an agent to get back to you the next day, listen again, look, more teeth grinding from our listeners. Was that during lockdown or between lockdowns?
That would have. I was back at work at the time, so it would have been after or in between. But yeah, I did not expect that to happen. Everywhere said they'll take weeks and weeks. And to set your listeners' minds at rest, I got plenty of more rejections, because when I got that reply, I thought, great. They want the full manuscript. I started sending out those first 3 chapters to loads of other agents, which was stupid, because they all said no. So I, like many authors, had the old spreadsheet of who's replied, who's wants the full manuscript, and I, got 40, 50 different rejections. So I certainly went through that process of getting hurt all over again in multitude ways of form rejections, and some of the worst ones were like, "We love this idea, we love the writing, but it's not for us." Those are the worst. You're like, well, what? And then you think, well, you can edit it, you can change it. Let's work together, because you read and you listen to podcasts, and they say, okay, well, your book's going to get edited by professionals. They're going to change bits. So I was all very happy to change it. Yeah. So I was always like, but I was thinking this earlier. It's a lot like dating. When you get rejected by agents and publishers, it's similar to getting dated by a romantic interest, because it's not always about you. Like, you don't know what's going on. You might remind them of an ex. They might have had a terrible day at work. You don't know what's going on in the agent's minds, how many other books they've got that are similar to this book, all that sort of stuff. So it's not always about the quality of your book. Sometimes it is just the market, and you don't know. So it's important to remember it.
Absolutely. We've used that. Yeah, we've used that dating analogy a few times, but it's nice to hear it from someone with so much extensive experience. And actually, I am just looking at because the version you sent me had a prologue and the book doesn't. Yeah. So did that just change? Did someone say to you, no prologues? Because I know sometimes you hear folks saying, oh, no, don't put a prologue at the beginning of a book. I have no problem with them, and I think that's hooey. But,
famously, they do say don't put a prologue. But interestingly, in fact, I think my editor suggested putting another prologue. So I took that prologue out, and then they suggested a totally different prologue, which we then took out. So it went through a couple of different prologues. I'm happy, always happy to read a prologue. I guess it's whether it's a good prologue or a bad prologue.
Exactly. I mean, I know I said my notes were harsh, but actually I'm just looking at here. I've written a couple of nice things. An excellent assured opening, funny and distinct, believable voice. You have no idea how rare that is, and it is rare. It got off to a cracking start. So you get an agent, and then it goes out in submission. What was that experience like for you?
I think, like lots of people, you're an ordinary person. You've not been through this process. It's quite unusual and strange, and you're not used to all this. And you're getting phone calls from an agent, and you never dreamed you'd have an agent. And they're saying, "Oh, this publisher wants to have a Zoom meeting with you." This publisher, and then we're very lucky to have a few TV offers. And you're going to meet TV people in offices. So it's very strange. And there's lots of people saying, oh, your book's really good and we really like you. And then maybe later on say, we don't actually want you. So you kind of, it's a weird process of people saying lots of nice things to you, but you're thinking, well, do I believe this? And it was very exciting. And it all happened very quickly, actually, after that. It did take a long time to get a good agent. But after that, it did happen quite quickly. And there was only about under a year between it actually being published and actually signing the deal with Head of Zeus. So it all happened quite quickly. But I was very lucky, yeah. So there's a brilliant team there that have sold it to America and sold it for TV rights. So fingers crossed in 2024, it'll be on TV screens or 2025 maybe.
Fantastic.
We'll see. Yeah, it might take
and let's talk about the marketing and publicity, because it's been really, really strong. First of all, I saw someone, I think it was on TikTok, the proof had been sent out to bloggers with love heart sweets and a mug. Were you aware of that?
Yeah, I think that's in South Africa, actually. Yeah, the cover has a bloody love heart there.
There we go. Excellent.
And when we did a little book launch for it, we had like the bad love hearts with like jokey messages on, because rather than romantic ones. But I was a journalist, so I sort of knew how the machinations of that process worked a bit. And I was lucky that I'd worked at the Daily Mirror before, and I'd worked at This Morning on ITV. And I knew when I worked at This Morning on ITV, I knew that a lot of our stories came from reading the newspaper, and we'd look at what was in the paper. If there was a story in the paper that was good, we'd find the person, ring them up and say, do you want to be on TV? So I did think, oh, well, if I can get this story in the paper, then perhaps my old colleagues at This Morning will pick it up and it'll validate it that this is a real story. It's not just their mate, their old colleague from This Morning. So I contacted my old pal who has later gone on to be the editor of the Sunday Mirror, and she very kindly said, okay, well, do your story about your dating. This guy's had a terrible dating life and he's ended up with a partner and a book deal. So I did have to sort of I'm not a particularly public-facing person. I'm quite an introverted person. So I did have to sort of bare my soul a little bit to do this. And I had to do quite an awkward photo shoot in our local park with my girlfriend. And we had to go and hold hands and be lovely and hold the book and smile. And I had to talk about all these terrible dates that I'd been on, how I was a loser. But I knew, or I hoped, that once that hit the paper, that my friends of This Morning would say, okay, well, this is actually a real story and we can invite him on the TV. And, it was touch and go whether that would happen. And luckily that did happen. And they said, come on. And they pitched it as sort of, here's somebody who used to work at This Morning and he was going on all these dates when he worked on This Morning and he's got a book out of it. So I was terrified. And I'd never done a TV interview. I'd obviously worked in TV and watched a lot of people done these interviews and coached them for their interviews, but it's totally different when you're sat on the sofa there and Holly Willoughby's waving your book at you and saying. So, and you know, in terms of sales, that obviously gave it a big bump, and that was in the day of the week of release for the hardback. And you can obviously, authors will know, but you can watch your Amazon rankings and you can see it get its little bestseller flag. So it's amazing the difference that does make. But you know what? A week later, it was plunged back down again. You know, it's quite a temporary thing. You know, so even that, and people, listeners, will know how hard it is to get any marketing. And publishers do their best, but they don't have huge marketing budgets, and you do have to do a lot of your own back. And I was lucky to have those contacts in the media to push that a bit. But even with that, you know, it's yesterday.
I think the lesson that the rest of us can take away from this is that there needs to be a hook in the story. You know, author writes book isn't enough, is it? If you can say, okay, this was inspired by the fact that I went on hundreds of dates, and the great hook with your one is that, you know, date 213 was your, you know, was your, you know, your partner now, and there's a happy ending to the story. So I think that kind of mindset of thinking, okay, I've now got to sell myself and sell a hook that can get people interested in the story. That's
you have to make a narrative of it. You've got to make a narrative, and I did sit back and I thought about that. What is the narrative of me that I can sell?
Yeah,
and like I said, you have to be a bit personal and bare your soul a little bit. And not everyone's going to be comfortable doing that, and I wasn't hugely comfortable doing that. But I really wanted to get the book in front of people, and I know how hard it is to get books in front of people. There's so many books out there, so I did sit back and yes, the 213, it is, I've just made up that number. It's probably more than that. But I thought, oh, what's a good number? If the successful date is number 213, I can call it lucky number 213. So I did sit and think about that, and I wrote down what my bad dates, and I exaggerated a few of the worst date stories, and I made it into a story. And again, my work at Real People magazine, doing those sort of narratives and turning real lives into stories did really help with that. So you've got to be a bit cheeky, but you've also, you're exactly right. You've got to think, how can I sell this book that it's just not another book? But, you know, you might not have that story, but I think everyone's got a reason why they wrote the book.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff. So big question is, what's next? What's coming next? I think one of my last notes were, will this be a series? Will Gwen carry on solving crimes?
Well, so I signed a 2-book deal with Head of Zeus. So the second book, I sort of wish it had been a sequel now, because I think what I found quite hard is writing another character that's different. And I think you give so much of yourself to your first book, and you make them quite similar to yourselves. And then suddenly, if you write a second book, you've got to think of a whole new main character who's totally different to the other main character. So I think sometimes it's a bit easier to write a sequel. But so the second book will not be a direct sequel. I would hope one day, we'll have to see how successful it is. Don't swipe right, but one day I would quite like to write a second book, because she was really fun character to write. Gwen, she's kind of sarcastic and funny and a bit ridiculous. So she's really fun to write, and it made it a lot easier to become that character and write that character. But no, the second book I think it's coming out in 2025, hopefully, and I'm in the middle of it now. I'm in the classic difficult second book, and it is hard. It's harder than I thought. I knew it was going to be hard, and it is harder than I even thought it would be, because suddenly it's your day job, suddenly there's deadlines, suddenly there's people, there's pressure. So that's what I will be doing. I was doing before this interview, and I will be doing after this interview, is getting back to staring at my blank Word document. You know, you can't. I was thinking this the other day, like, what an opportunity, what an amazing thing to have to be contracted to write a second book is amazing. So sometimes I'm like tearing my hair out, thinking, oh God, I really don't want to write this. But then you have to pinch yourself and say, come on, like, this is the dream. I was thinking earlier, I missed a deal like this, but at the start of the bestseller podcast, it says, what does it say? It says, finish the book, quit your day job, become a best-selling author.
Yes, yeah.
Go through that in my head, and every time I listen to the podcast, I focus on that bit, or I rewind that bit and I listen. And I did exactly that. I finished the book, quit my day job, and now I've just got to do the third one. I've just got to become a best-selling author. Hopefully it will happen, but it's worth having that mantra. And the other thing I used to do was like superimpose a picture of the cover of my book onto pictures of bestseller lists or bookshops, and just stare at the photo and think, focus, to do this. Just to remind yourself what the end goal is, because it can be hard when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, Luke, if anyone can do this, you can. Don't Swipe Right is an absolute joy to read. It's so much fun. It's a proper page turner, and the sex scene in the police station does earn its place. Don't make no mistakes there. It's worth it just for that. Thanks so much for coming on and talking about it. It's just to have one of our listeners, have such an amazing experience, and this is the beginning of a great career.
And I should say that I listen to the Bestseller Explorer every week, and it really is inspiring. And there's so much good advice there that I used. So go back, listen to all the old episodes, and it's really helpful. So thank you to both Marks. It's been really useful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Luke. I appreciate it. Take care, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Mark.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Oh, this is brilliant! This is brilliant. What a great interview as well. As soon as I heard the context of what he wrote, but 212 dates and then some. Honestly, that is going it some. I mean, I don't know anyone who's tried online dating. 212 dates. I mean, how many years was it he was doing that for? That must have been several years at least, because that would be many dates over. Yeah,
it's lots. Yeah, and it's an alien world, because Claire and I met when we were 18, so it's all pre-internet, and it's just and it's a perilous world out there, because don't forget, vegetarian, non-smoking animal lover would have been Adolf Hitler's dating profile, so it's you can't. It's such a perilous world out there. So and I think it's just I think he's really hit on something here that a lot of people can relate to, and that is one of the great pillars of a bestseller. I think is that relatability.
Absolutely, and I think it is a brave new world. I mean, when I started out in the internet back in the mid-90s, when I worked for a big internet company, Yahoo had a grey background to it. That was those. Do you remember where they didn't even have colours? Like, you can even have a white background to a website. Nothing like YouTube existed. Google was still an apple in the in the eye of Larry's mind. No one had ever heard of Jeff Bezos or Amazon, and dating apps didn't really start didn't really gain momentum until kind of, I think, in the 2000s. And so most people our age, who've been, if they've been in a long-term relationship, going back out into the world is the first time they'll be dating in sometimes 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And going on an app is just the most bizarre. It feels so fake and so weird. And this idea of swiping right, like literally, that you're making a decision based on, because they do say people are naturally, it starts with the attraction to the person, which I get, which is why, you've got to be attracted to the person physically. But the idea that you're just dismissing people, flicking them away, it does work. It just blows my mind. It does,
Luke found love. A couple of people I used to work with, younger than me, married with kids. It clearly works. So
it does.
We should set up an app for publishers and authors. So if you swipe left, you get a book deal. How's it taken us so long to think of that?
Yeah, what would we call it?
Come back to me on that one. Yes.
Suggestions, please. What would you call a book dating app? Or maybe, I mean, they have
bestseller matchmaker. No,
there you go. That's nice. Well, the thing is, they also have like lots of genre-based apps now. There's Hinged. Which is
Hinge, because a friend of mine is about to go on Hinge.
There's Hinge,
like trending people.
That's for artistic creatives. There's Unhinged. That's for all the psychopaths. It's good to keep them in one group.
Yes.
But there's Christian dating websites.
Yeah.
There's one called Field. Have you heard of that one?
No.
For threesomes, yeah. I mean,
I'm not going to ask how you know about that.
Oh, Mark, it's one of the most popular ones, Mark.
It's all those long nights in Canada, isn't it?
I mean, there's Bumble. There's plenty of Plenty of Fish? Is it that's one called Plenty of Fish? The idea is there's plenty of fish in the ocean. Match. There's so many different, but there's all ones now that they're getting so specialized. But the reason I'm saying all this is there a dating site for writers?
Again,
right.
we should like this is a gap in the market, isn't it?
Last week, we interviewed, Tracy and Nina co-authoring. There's obviously been a big theme of the two of us. That was how this podcast started, co-authoring. Yeah. Imagine if you could meet your perfect partner, but you could also then write a book with them. How brilliant would that be?
Neurotic fantasy author looking for similar.
Yeah. Good at world building, crap at characters.
Yes.
You just
good sense of humor essential.
Good sense of humor essential. And also, you know what? If both of you were writers, you'd avoid all that problem of one person in the relationship being a writer and always scurrying away for hours by themselves, and the other partner sitting alone on the on the sofa.
The danger there, though, is if one of you becomes a massive, colossal, mega hit bestseller, and the other one is still struggling to even
can't get a book
agent.
Deal.
Yeah.
That's not going to work, is it?
Yeah. That requires a lot of.
And then if you both became best-selling authors, you'd be this power couple, right? And then you'd have things like joint book signings, but then you'd have the thing you talked about the other week where you're looking at each other's pile going, hey, they've got a bigger lineup, right? Yeah, all kinds of drama.
Counting people in the line. Yeah, don't want that.
Although what would be good though is you'd have your own little kind of comforting group where every time you got a 1-star review, you could say, "Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, know what that's like." Exactly. You can get over. You can push
someone
through.
Someone who understands. Yeah.
Yeah. But imagine the kids as well. 2 authors, be like the King family, wouldn't it? Tabitha and Stephen, and then they have a ton of writer kids.
Yeah, that's what's happened, basically. Yeah.
And that's very common. It's weird. I was looking back. I mentioned the other day that my dear granny passed at 101 a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
And my mum gave me to translate a 12-page story of her life when she was fleeing Prussia from the Russian army. And it starts with her leaving her Prussian town at in the middle of the night during the middle of winter, and it's -20. She's pregnant with my mum.
Oh my gosh.
I think she's like probably 5 or 6 months pregnant with my mum. She has a sled, just to give you context of how cold it was, and she pulls this sled with anything that she can pile on it, and then she flees into the night. And then it's this story of how then she gives birth to my mum under a kind of bomb shelter during an air raid. Honestly, Mark, when I stand back and look at that, and I think about, we talked about sliding doors a lot on this podcast about how things can happen and amazing coincidences and serendipity and all the things that come together to make, even meeting your love of your life, whatever it might be. We all think about that. But I think, how grateful am I to be sitting here talking about this story in the context of what's happening today in the world, without trying to bring the Christmas cheer down too much. But like fleeing from the Russians, it's like, it's such a cycle of life. And this was nearly, not 100 years ago, but 85 years ago, I think. Yeah. And I'm just so grateful that I'm here and able to tell this story, because I think of all the things that had to happen for my grandmother to still be alive, and then to be able to give birth to my mum, and then all the other things that happened since then. Absolutely mind-blowing, isn't it? How amazing. Every morning we wake up, we should just be grateful that we get the chance to do whatever we end up doing for that day, because a lot of people didn't get that chance. A lot of kids of the war, grandkids of the war, they're not here because they didn't make it. So it's something to celebrate, isn't it? It's something to be really, really, really grateful. But this story I've got, it's just incredible because it puts into context that, and when I read it, I thought, wow, my grandmother could, it's the only thing she ever wrote. And she could really write. It was like, it's a really beautiful account. And then my uncle ended up writing a book. My mum became a translator early in life, German to English. So there's a theme of book writers. My dad, before he passed, he wrote a bit of a kind of 30-page kind of retelling of his life. So I do think it does run through families, or either it keeps people inspired to keep writing when you know that your grandparents or parents wrote. I mean, look at your family as well. You've got writers popping up all over the place, haven't you?
Well, there's my Aunt Marion.
But your daughter as well.
Yeah, my daughter's a terrific writer, but they're good storytellers. They don't write it down. But I remember just coming home from school, and then mum and dad round the dinner table would just tell the best stories, and aunts and uncles, just great storytellers. Very, very funny. Naturally knew how to spin a yarn kind of thing. Yeah. I had a great Irish uncle called Luce. I'd only ever see him when we went to Ireland, rather. Sorry, why did it come on? I'd only ever see him when I went to Ireland, but he would tell me these great ghost stories, and he'd I think I spoke about this when we were talking about the film Unwelcome. He'd pepper it by going, he'd tell you the story that the ghost, she came through the wall there, as true as I'm sitting here. And then she came towards me, as true as I'm sitting here. And, it's just that way of keeping you on the hook. And you instinctively learn a lot from that, which is, so apologies to everyone in Ireland for the accent.
No, that's a great
accent. And Australia.
Do you know what, though? The Irish particularly, I find just brilliant storytellers. It's part of the culture. It's just absolutely, part and laughing as well. Yeah, having fun. Brilliant. Yeah. Now, Luke talked about getting feedback from other people. I know he's obviously sent you the book, and but I really do think this is a good thing to do if you haven't got a group of people. I mean, obviously in the academy we've got like beta readers, but it's hard sometimes for some people just to find people. But sometimes getting a bit of professional feedback can really help. I mean, encourage you, but also point out the things that maybe need to change before you start pitching it out to agents, publishing companies, and the like.
Absolutely. And I was very bad at this starting out. Certainly when I wrote my plays, I've written a play and you're all going to say the lines, and then you come up against the actors and the director and everyone else in, the production team or whatever, and everyone's got an opinion. And it's kind of, I can tell you, your first couple of plays, you're thinking, I should have done a couple more drafts before I showed it to this lot, or I should have shown it to someone. So, because you're very much at the sharp end there. And certainly, when we started the podcast, I don't think I'd ever used a beta reader, not in that kind of way. Yeah. In a constructive way. I was kind of, I don't want to show it to anyone because they're going to find fault with it. It's a terrible, they're going to criticize kind of thing. Whereas now it's such an essential part of my process. I can't imagine doing without it, and it's an opportunity to make it better. Simple as that, And which is why I've I enjoy doing it for other writers because I learn from it as well. I love looking at what other writers are doing and seeing something that isn't quite polished and isn't quite 100% and just thinking, this is great. And I can see the shape of this. And I think, maybe a few changes here or there, this could be absolutely knockout. So, I've come around complete full circle with that. It's so essential.
I think it's good to be a beta reader before you look for beta readers as well, I think, because I think it's important to kind of learn what it is to be a beta reader first and then you will have a much more successful group of beta readers because you'll have an appreciation for, the type of, understanding what type of feedback they want and trying to be constructively criticizing or constructive feedback, which is something of value to them rather than something that will just kind of, make them want to give up because they think, oh, I can't do any of this. So I think I would encourage anyone who's writing a book but has never done a beta reading role, then to do that. It's definitely something worth trying. The other thing that Luke talked about with regards to I don't know how to explain it, but it's like the fact that he sent out this submission expecting 8 weeks for feedback on average, and then the next day got a response from his top major agent. How mad is that?
Yeah, and then had a weekend in Barcelona to knock it into shape, which is
but it makes me think. I mean, it's the kind of crazy thing I probably do, and I think in some ways when that does happen and something turns around so quickly, no matter how stressful it might be, wow, how quickly can you get things done? And it just shows you what you're capable of doing under pressure and a really tight deadline. Because I was thinking, if Luke hadn't have done that, if he hadn't sent it out and thought, I'll just spend he probably would have spent months working on that, wouldn't he?
Yes.
But he turned it around in a very short period of time. It wasn't the best, but it didn't mean that the project ended, and he didn't end up getting that agent, but it gave him enough impetus to end up finding the right agent, getting a great book deal, and all the great things have happened to him since.
Yeah, there's nothing like a deadline. But that said, I think the lesson to learn here as well is the deadline thing is important, but also don't send it out until it's ready. It's got to be ready. The thing I'm hearing, and I'm hearing this from a lot of authors who are on submission, and I don't know how true this is, but I would just take it as a truism just to help yourself. But I'm hearing that a lot of publishers are looking for books that are pretty much ready to publish without editing, because the editors are all stretched. So many people have been made redundant. There are fewer resources at publishers. So if you can present a book to a publisher that needs as little editing as possible, I think the odds of you getting a foot in the door will be increased, because I just don't. There used to be a time, certainly when I was, working in publishing, where you'd get something that was a diamond in the rough, and they think, you know what, I can knock this into shape. I don't think they've got the time to do that anymore. I don't think they've got we talk about it being a developmental edit, and certainly if you're an indie author, you can do that if you can afford that, and that's great. But trad publishing, I think it's got to be as good as it possibly can.
Do you know what though? That concerns me a little bit, Mark. Because
it concerns me
because it's basically, when you look at all the things, if you go back pre-internet and you think of all the things that a publisher did, and it's like removing that piece is one of the biggest chunks. I mean, obviously there's the marketing, but nowadays that's shared with the author. The author's expected to be involved in the marketing, so that's another thing that's been. So it makes me think. Obviously, I'm guessing it's evolving as everything else.
I mean, look, this is scuttlebutt on Facebook groups. Yeah. So take it with as big a small pinch of salt as you want. But it kind of rings true to me. There's something about, and I think you'd just do yourself a favor if you'd send something that is as good as it possibly can be.
For people who might be listening to this for the first time and they're getting into it, might be the first time they've ever listened to a book writing podcast, the word submission can be quite confusing for some people. How would you describe that to someone that doesn't know what a submission means? It's
usually you've got an agent who has taken on your book and has said, right, it's ready to go out and we're going to put it out in submission, which usually means a first round of maybe 5 or 6 key publishers that they think, editors, in fact, key editors, because the agent will know, we have an idea of what publishers might be looking for, what imprints might be looking for, but one of the reasons you have an agent is they will know what the editors are looking for. They will know that editor X at imprint Y is looking specifically for this kind of romantic murder mystery that Luke has written, and they will go, I know Freddie's looking for that. I'm going to send it to Freddie. They're going to love this. That kind of shortens the odds for you, which is all the more disheartening when it comes back with a rejection. So, but they'll maybe do a first round and then a second round, and if after that they're not getting any bites, they might go, okay, we need to regroup. Do we need to rethink this? That kind of thing. But it can take weeks as well. The 8 weeks thing that Luke was quoting for an agent, at least, is usually the bare minimum these days. Just put it out to an agent and then start writing the next thing. Forget about it. Try and put it out of your head and just get on with, what's in front of you. Because if you sit there fretting and worrying about what's going to happen, you'll be sort of paralyzed with fear. Because they've all got massive slush piles now, absolutely massive slush piles, particularly post-lockdown, because it seems that, everyone was writing a lockdown novel.
Well, I think maybe a lot of people are writing lockdown novels and using the lockdown time to do it. And so a lot of people probably didn't send things on submission during lockdown because they would, and a lot of new people. I mean, take Luke. He's as you called it, would you call him a COVID writer? There's going to be a kind of, it's like baby boomers. It's like people that started writing in lockdown. I noticed with music as well, there's been such a amazing output of music, which is all the stuff for people writing in lockdown when they weren't touring and the like. So interesting things. Now, I liked that Luke or his publicity team kind of thought outside the box, and we're using some really interesting merchandise, should we call it, this love heart mug that they sent out. And this takes us to this idea of, having to have a hook as an author, not just, like you said, authors that writing a book is not a story.
Author writes book is not a news story. No. So we got two things here. We got the sort of the publishers sending out little gifts with the book, and not everyone gets that. That sort of, the top tier of authors generally
that's
get
pricey as well, isn't it?
It's expensive.
Physical.
It used to happen a lot. I remember when sort of the heyday of Orion in the sort of the mid 2000s, we used to send stuff out all the time. We had this kind of marketing budget where we do presentations and we take toys along and things like that, just anything essentially just to grease the wheels of commerce, so to speak. And I remember it came to a head because there was a story in the bookseller, and it was an Orion book where this happened, where they sent out books with snow globes, and one of them leaked. So this reviewer opened this package. They thought, oh, I've got a package from Orion. They opened it up, and the snow globe leaked all over their computer. No. And they wrote for a national newspaper, and they said, I have had it with all these gifts and gimmicks. This has got to stop. It died right down again. And then the internet came along and bloggers came along, and then what's happened is, because that Instagrammable thing of, if you send it to a blogger and maybe with a gift or snacks or whatever, but they're much more likely to put that up on Instagram and start talking about your book. So it's sort of come back again, this thing of sending little packages and gifts and things like that.
Well, in a way, it amplifies the value of it, because not only do you get that person interested, they've then got some content to put on their social media as well, the unboxing or look what I just got, which then has even greater effect. So I can see how that's kind of picked up again. It's fascinating, isn't it?
You got that sort of that side of things, that sort of marketing publicity side of it. But just solely on the publicity, obviously Luke, we can't all do this, because Luke, he worked for the Mirror, and he got a story in the Mirror which helped him position it for this morning. And listen, I'm going to put a link in the show notes so you can watch the clip of Luke. It's a Daily Mail link. I apologize for that. But there is a video embedded in the page where you can watch the clip of Luke talking to Holly on This Morning. And it's interesting that, he said it moved the needle for a bit. I don't know, authors were all desperate to get on telly because we think it's going to, and it does. One of the jobs I used to do when I looked after the Amazon account, Amazon eventually released a thing where you could look by the hour at sale spikes for your books. So we would go, okay, so-and-so's going on this morning, and you'd look, and from like 10 o'clock to 1 in the afternoon, there'd be a massive sales spike, and then it would drop off. So I know we think these things can be a kind of, we think they can be a miracle that can change things, but it doesn't always
It doesn't
work.
like have a... But here's a question. I'm curious about this, because I've heard this before, where you get these massive spikes and then it drops off. But for me, is the drop off slightly higher than the average previously? Because that's the build, isn't it? That's where the new people that have got the book read the book and then recommend it. So I think what you get is these massive spikes, but what they are is they're an influx of new readers coming in, all reading your book around the same time. And then if the book's great, then you start to get the flywheel effect of people recommending. So the spikes, I think these spikes are great because they get you to that place quicker. But you can do it organically. It just takes a lot longer if you're doing it literally one reader at a time.
You're using the word flywheel there. I got a flashback to so many bloody sales meetings where they were like, have we got the flywheel effect? They would talk about this. They would say, has it, and it's like, oh God, I'm not a miracle worker. Sometimes it did and sometimes it didn't. And there was no kind of rhyme or reason to it. I mean, usually what it was, if you had a sustained campaign, so like every year we'd have the Hairy Bikers. They do a new cookery book, and the Hairy Bikers usually had a TV show, but then they would go on, I don't know, This Morning or The One Show or something. They would have a week where they blitzed publicity and they do book events. And it was that combination of sort of carpet bombing of publicity and marketing that gave the book its kind of momentum. And it took a lot of effort.
It does take
So I
time,
think this idea
yeah.
of thinking, I'm going to go on one radio show or one TV show and I'm set for life. But then the flip side of that is when I started at Orion, we published Michelle Paver and her first Wolf Brother book, which is a wonderful book. Cannot recommend it highly enough. It's just fantastic. And I looked after the Ottokars account, and I was relatively new, and I cocked up the order. I doubled the order. So instead of sending 3,000 copies to Ottokars, I sent 6,000 copies. And I thought I was going to get sacked because I was new to the job. And, it sent twice as many copies. I thought, this is it. I'm done for. I'm absolutely done for. Michelle went on News at 10. I don't know how she did it. She went on News at 10. The book flew off the shelves. Waterstones ran out. Ottokars had a massive market share because they had all the stock, and suddenly I was the biggest hero in the company.
I love it.
Yeah, it's just
a great
phenomenal.
story.
Because of my stupid little I filled out the piece of paperwork twice. So,
Wow. How crazy is that? I mean, what are the chances?
I can admit to that now.
But a little preview. Again, I've been very, very. I'm holding things back for next year's podcast when I attempt to become a bestseller in nonfiction. But as part of that journey, Mark, I tell you what, I've got my hook, my book hook.
Excellent.
I've got that down already, and I've also got the author hook as well. It's all part of it, and I am going to be on podcasts, TV, radio. If this works, I'm going for it big time, and it's ridiculous.
I expect nothing less.
You know exactly. It's I'm gonna document it week by week, and the great thing is I'm giving myself a whole year of publicity for the book.
Yeah, that's what you have to do.
It's
not just about the release date anymore.
No, it isn't.
It's sustaining it.
It's going to be fascinating to see, because I also fully recognize that, if I get on national TV or national radio to talk about the book, it's going to be amazing, but it is not going to be the one thing that's suddenly going to break the people hearing about the book, buying the book, signing up to, the mailing list, whatever it might be. It's going to be continually building and building and building it constantly.
The best publicity for any book, doesn't matter what it is me saying to you, you've got to read this.
Yeah, word of mouth. And that's the difference when you go on TV and you get the spike. When the book is great and people recommend it, then it builds. If the book's not got that word of mouth factor, it kind of then tails off a bit. And I think that's, no matter how much marketing you throw at something, if the book's not got the word of mouth effect, it won't ever really get to that exponential growth curve. That's my theory. Going to test it out. I mean, I have no idea whether my book's going to have the word of mouth effect. I mean,
I'll be talking about it. Don't worry.
Well, yeah, I know, right? Have you read this crap? But no, I mean, in terms of, it's going to be, I'm doing this with eyes wide open, massive experiment. I'm going to go large and huge in terms of my, visualization of what I wanted to do.
Right. In your dating app.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, I'm going to be observing with everyone else what actually happens, because I think by really kind of talking about what's happening, it will really start to unpack a bit about how this works and what doesn't work as well, which is just as valuable as an author to learn about. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating, but learn a few things on the podcast, which then, it's time to put it into action, right?
Absolutely.
In the extended version, folks, of the podcast today, we're going to be talking about openings. Openings for books,
because Luke had to rewrite his several times. So and they're not easy.
Very important. Actually, we have a course on the Academy about your first page and your first chapter and your first line of your first page as well. That's how important this is. And we're also going to be talking about superimposing your book that you're writing right now, your book cover, and popping it in the bestseller charts. We're going to tell you a bit about how to do that and why that's a brilliant thing to do as well. So if you'd like to join us in the extended edition of this podcast, simply pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. So, Mr. Stay, what's happening on social media and wins this week?
Social media. Well, Kate Baker, who long-time supporter of the podcast and in the Academy as well, her wonderful Made of Steel, that's MAID, Made of Steel. She's ticking off another box in her wish list here, in that she's going to be she's going to be an in conversation event at the Book Nook, which is in Tolsbury in Essex on Tuesday 19th of December, and you can book tickets on Eventbrite. I'm going to put a link in the show notes so you can check that out. But Kate has been an absolute superstar in the Academy and the bestseller group on Facebook as well, and it's just been brilliant seeing her go from strength to strength, and each time she's got a bit of news, it's some other little goal. We're talking about, in the extended version, about imagining these things and making them happen, envisioning these things. And with Kate, it's just happening. She's an absolute superstar. So that's 19th of December, 7 p.m. at the Book Nook in Tolsbury, Essex.
Brilliant stuff.
And Zoe Richards also in the Academy. Now, Zoe been a regular at the surgeries on Wednesday nights in the Academy. I know she was talking about getting her edit notes from her publisher. And just a few days ago, she says, finished tea and told my husband I'm off to edit these last 2 words. He wants to know what editing the end needs. Reader, I've 2 pages to edit, if only it was just 2 words. And then a few hours later, she tweeted, this glass of wine is a celebration. Line edits finished at 7:31 on the 24th of November, 2023. Phew, that was a bumpy ride. Thanks for helping me along, folks. So huge congrats on that, Zoe. Can't wait to see your book.
I've got to tell you something. I've got to tell you something brilliant that happened in the life coaching for writers in the Academy on this Monday, Mark. I was running through the wins. We always do this thing where we run through the wins of all the Academy members at the beginning of the session. It's one of my favorite bits. It's pages and pages now. It's bonkers. But Zoe was on the call and she talked about how she was getting super excited about her book coming out. And I said, something happened the other day, Zoe. I got an email from your publicist. And she said, really? And she didn't even know that they were starting to promote her book, which is coming out next summer. And it was so professionally done. It was brilliant. And I got to basically show her publicist's email that I received on the podcast, saying, and of course the publicist didn't realize that Zoe is, part of the Academy, but it was just so proactive and so brilliant. And I said, yeah, look, it's all happening. And she was just blown away and so over the moon and excited about the fact that this whole wheel is in motion now for her book coming out next year. So we'll be celebrating that with Zoe over the coming months for sure. Brilliant stuff. Brilliant. Excellent, folks. Well, listen, if you've got any wins that you'd like to share with us, always remember you can pop along to the contact form on the bestsellerexperiment.com website. Whilst you're there, click on the newsletter tab and fill out your email address, and we'll send you weekly updates of all of the fun stuff happening in Bestseller Experiment HQ. Plus, a lot of the news that's going to be coming out over the next couple of weeks and months is all the new things that are going to be happening in the podcast. And Mark, how can people get hold of us on socials?
On Facebook, we are Bestseller Experiment. Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, we are at BestsellerXP. Come and say hello. If you've enjoyed the show, if you've been inspired by Luke or any of the authors who've been on the show, give us a rating or a review or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you, as always, to our editors, Dave and JD.
Absolutely. And don't forget, folks, sign up to the Academy. Get in on the early birds before Christmas. It's academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. The fiction and the non-fiction program are open for people wanting to join us in January of next year. And I think it's also important to say, Mark, as well, that 25th of December is a very special day, not least it being Christmas Day. But it's also going to be a very special episode of the Bestseller Experiment that we're going to be doing, and it'll be Mark's last one on the podcast. So do join us for that. It's going to be an absolute humdinger. You will not want to miss it, and we look forward to having some fun and games on that episode as well. So, folks, have a great writing week, and it's a goodbye from Mark 1
and a goodbye from Mark 2. Goodbye.
Goodbye.